Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed participants and distinguished guests, welcome to the Impact webinar delving into MENA's hydrogen policy and practice, what lies ahead of COP28. My name is Molly Huang, Head of Content at Leader Associates, and your host for today's session. The Middle East and North Africa region is taking a leading role in shaping a sustainable energy future, with a strong focus on decarbonization through renewables and hydrogen. Today's event, just before COP28 in Dubai, offers a prime opportunity to explore MENA's hydrogen journey and future prospects. In the next 2 hours, our exceptional lineup of speakers will dive into key topics, including the status of green hydrogen in MENA with insights from BCG, and how regional energy leaders like ADNOC, Hydro, and Aramco are shaping the future. We are also excited to include leading hydrogen organizations like Hydrogen Egypt and Cluster Green H2 of Morocco, highlighting the growing interest of hydrogen in Africa. Our virtual auditorium is filled with over 200 global hydrogen policymakers, investors, developers, financiers, and value chain partners. Following each presentation, we'll provide a dedicated Q&A session, and I strongly recommend our audience to submit your questions in the Q&A box. Your active participation is key to making this event insightful and engaging. It's also important to note that this event is part of the digital content of the third Connecting Green Hydrogen MENA 2024. This premier MENA hydrogen event, scheduled for April 23rd to 25th, 2024 in Dubai, aims to bring together over 3,000 hydrogen project developers and supply chain partners from around the globe and the MENA region. We are pleased to announce early confirmed speakers from influential organizations such as the Dubai Supreme Council of Energy, the Energy Ministries of the Netherlands and Japan, ADNOC, Air Products, Aqua Power, ENGIE, and many more. Without further ado, let's begin by inviting our first speaker on stage, Mr. Javier Doblas, partner at BCG, who will bring us with his opening keynote, Fueling Hope and Progress, MENA's Rise and Projects in the Global Hydrogen Revolution. Mr. Doblas, the stage is now yours.
Thank you very much, Molly. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'll be now sharing my screen. In the meantime, I'd like to say that very happy to be here and opening this session today. How the MENA region is sort of leading the green hydrogen revolution. Quickly about myself, so I'm a partner at Boston Consulting Group. I'm both part of the energy and climate and sustainability teams. I've been working across the Middle East and Europe, and I'm currently leading the low carbon hydrogen topic for BCG in the Middle East. So for today, I want to discuss 3 things. First, I'd like to provide a quick overview of recent trends in the global hydrogen market. So we start globally, and then in the second moment, we dive into the MENA hydrogen push and showcase how the region is actually taking a leading role. And finally, I would like to open up a bit the discussion and discuss more broadly what's the opportunity from the energy transition that the MENA region can capture beyond hydrogen. So starting with the global hydrogen market. So the hydrogen, low carbon hydrogen is a key decarbonization lever. So in the end, the demand for low carbon hydrogen will depend on how fast and how ambitious the world is in decarbonizing. So in a 2-degree scenario, our expectation is that the global demand for low carbon hydrogen could reach around 25 to 30 million tons by 2030, ramping up to around 150 million tons by 2040, and then reaching around 340 million tons by 2050 in a 2-degree scenario. And that's to be compared with the currently gray hydrogen, which stands around 95 million tons per annum. So roughly a tripling or a quadrupling of the market and becoming low carbon hydrogen. What is also very clear now is that low carbon hydrogen has a number of priority use cases. So the priorities are first to decarbonize the current use case of gray hydrogen. That means refining, ammonia, and methanol production, primarily. And then, or in parallel, moving to the sectors where there is really no other alternative than low carbon hydrogen to decarbonize those sectors. And here I'm speaking of green steel, international aviation, or international shipping. So really, it's very clear that hydrogen is not going to be a hydrogen economy. Hydrogen is going to be used everywhere. Now, there's a number of sectors where there are much better alternatives, in particular the direct electrification. And that's, for instance, the case for light road vehicles. So there will be a big demand for hydrogen, but it's not going to be a green hydrogen economy everywhere. We move on. There are interesting signs that show that the market is starting to emerge. So I'm taking now the example of the shipping sector. And globally, shippers have ordered more than 180 dual fuel vessels that will run with 100% or partially with methanol. And if you look at that demand for the actual from those vessels, we can reach by 2028 around 25 million tons of methanol. And that is to be compared, so that's the green part of the chart, that is to be compared to what has been already secured as offtake from those shippers, which is around 6 million tons of methanol, meaning that this is demand that is coming because the vessels have been ordered, and hence these shippers will need to start securing an offtake. So clearly, initial positive signs that the market is finally emerging. When you look at regulation, so countries around the world have clearly understood that the importance of low carbon hydrogen as both a decarbonization lever and a new business opportunity to help grow the GDP. And globally, there are now more than 40 countries who have defined a national hydrogen strategy, doubling from 2022. So clearly, there's momentum picking up, and all these countries represent 80% of global GHG emissions. However, what we see is that most of these strategies are primarily focused on the supply side. So for instance, setting gigawatt electrolyzer targets or production targets and incentives, much less on the demand side. But here on the demand side as well, we're starting to see some initial policy initiatives. And a key one is what's happening in the European Union. So the EU recently approved the Renewable Energy Directive, which is setting mandatory targets for the use of renewable hydrogen. In particular, a target of 42% hydrogen used in industries that must be green by 2030, ramping up to 60% by 2035. So that will already require 4 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030 for just industry alone. So again, positive signs that the industry is finally emerging. On the supply side, when you look at the pipeline of projects, has been growing very fast. So now globally, there's more than 1,000 projects that have been announced when you combine both green and blue hydrogen projects, representing almost 75 million tons of low carbon hydrogen production by 2030. And that is to be compared with an estimated demand by 2030 of around 29 million tons. So if all these projects materialize, we'll have we'll have an oversupply. Of course, these projects are mostly on very early stages, just announcements, so not all of them will materialize. However, we see quite a few projects already approaching FID or being in construction. So again, also positive signs on the supply side. A point I wanted to bring as well to the attention of the audience is the creation of hydrogen hubs. So more and more we see countries, regions that are structuring their hydrogen initiatives in the form of hubs. That is clusters where bringing together both the supply side and the demand side, as well as the infrastructure. And indeed makes a lot of sense to create those hubs because they generate quite significant economies of scale. However, our research suggests that above 40 connection points, above 40 connection points of 1 million ton hydrogen demand, then you start seeing the additional transportation costs for the hydrogen start to outweigh the economies of scale. But clearly, the emergence of these hubs is a key trend that we see. And by the way, just last week, the US announced that 7 hubs across the country have been selected to receive funding from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. So these 7 projects will be receiving 7 billion in funding. So that's a prime, excellent example of how the industry is starting to structure itself in the form of hubs. However, until now, I've been showing a relatively rosy picture that, yes, very positive signs, the momentum growing, but the industry is still relatively nascent and is facing a number of challenges. And I'm going to show you a few of them. First one, challenge number 1 is around the difficulty to secure a long-term offtake. So right now we see very few customers that are willing to commit to more than 10 years offtake, actually less than 3%, according to our survey. And not having a long-term offtake complexifies the financing for the projects. So that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is that from our experience, particularly in Europe, when we move from project announcements, designs to actual projects, we actually see that the cost end up being much higher than the initial consensus view. So right now with our work in Europe, we're seeing that in the initial consensus view was more around $3 per kilogram of hydrogen as a cost for 2030 as a projection. Now we're more in the $5 to $8 per kilogram. So clearly a number of elements are driving this increase in cost. First is the higher capital cost, for instance, with the rise in interest rates, and these weighs heavily on the project cost because these are very capital intensive projects. Supply chain constraints. I mean, we know that the industry is facing a number of issues with regards to wind power. You also have a shortfall of electrolyzer manufacturing capacity, or the lack of infrastructure, be it pipeline, export, import infrastructure. So clearly, the industry is facing a cost problem. And finally, the last challenge I touched upon briefly is the supply chain bottlenecks. When you look at the overall supply chain, we see structural challenges with renewables because we'll need to install significant gigawatt capacity to produce the green hydrogen. But that gigawatt, that manufacturing capacity for renewables is competing for the renewables for the power sector, which is in the end the primary decarbonization lever. So we have a structural challenge there. Also a challenge in electrolyzers. So for the next 4 or 5 years, we see a potential shortfall in the electrolyzer manufacturing capacity. And then plans are wrapping up, but for the next 4 or 5 years, so from 2024 to 2028 or so, if your project is looking to secure a supply of electrolyzer, there might be an issue there. Another potential issue is on the shipping side and the infrastructure side. If we indeed think that 20% or 30% of the global hydrogen will be traded internationally, you will need to secure those tankers, in particular the ammonia tankers, to transport this hydrogen. And here, again, we don't see necessarily the supply chain following. So that would be challenge number 3. Now that I've provided a global perspective, let's deep dive into the hydrogen push in the MENA region. The starting point is that we see that only a few regions globally will be able to produce hydrogen competitively and at scale. In other words, there are a number of regions which will be short in hydrogen and will need to import. And that's here we're mainly talking about Western Europe, South Korea, and Japan. So there's a clear export opportunity for the Middle East and the overall MENA region. Second, so yes, the structural demand coming from those regions, and as well from a cost perspective, the differences in hydrogen production costs can justify the international shipping of derivatives mainly. And here, the MENA region is quite well positioned on the cost curve, and that's mainly driven by good solar and wind resources that enable to have a high capacity factor and hence run the electrolyzer at a higher utilization rate and relatively attractive WACC. So overall, when you look at Morocco, Oman, Saudi Arabia, they're well positioned on the cost curve, in particular to deliver to Europe. What we also see is that if indeed these attractive costs are able to materialize, the Middle East and Africa can become the largest, if we combine the potential for both, the largest exporter globally. But you need to expect significant competition for market share from Oceania and the Americas. And in the end, the import markets are relatively small in numbers. We're talking, as we mentioned, Japan, Korea, Western Europe, and maybe other parts of Europe. So significant competition expected. So the Middle East, the MENA countries have clearly understood that they have a big opportunity here. And that's why they have announced ambitious hydrogen strategies. I'm not going to deep dive too much on that because the esteemed speakers that will come after me will provide more details on their respective country strategies. But very briefly, Saudi Arabia has announced that they want to become the world's largest hydrogen exporter, and they're setting up plans for that. UAE also has a very ambitious strategy. They want to produce 50 million tons of low carbon hydrogen by 2050. They're setting up hydrogen hubs. They want to capture roughly 25% market share by 2030. Oman, also very ambitious strategy. They want to produce 1 million tons by 2030, ramping up to 8 million tons by 2050, and then doing that through a very innovative public auction process. And finally, Egypt also wants to capture a significant market share, 5 to 8% by 2030, 2040. So clearly, the hydrogen opportunity is something that the Middle East countries want to pursue and are actually actively pursuing. And this translates into projects. When you look at the pipeline of projects, actually the ones, when you combine both Africa and Middle East, it has the highest share of projects. So a total of 20 million tons of projects active, planned, or announced from the MENA region. And that's the highest globally. So this is the high-level pipeline. And then concretely, there are a number of projects in the region, a lot of them in Egypt, Oman as well through the auction process, in Saudi Arabia. Actually, Saudi Arabia is the most advanced one with the NEOM project that actually taken FID, is under construction and will start producing by 2026. And here right now on this slide, I'm only showing the large projects, the ones that are above 100,000 tons of green hydrogen per annum. So these are gigawatt scale projects. However, even though the Middle East, the MENA region is very advanced and pushing a lot and has very ambitious, they are not exempt from the general industry challenges, in particular the higher than anticipated costs. And this is what happened with NEOM. So last year, a few months ago, they announced that they actually had to increase their budget by 70% because of higher financing costs, but also because they were expanding the scope of the project to include infrastructure so that the project would become more self-sufficient and hence be less impacted by potential supply chain bottlenecks. So that concludes the push from the MENA region. And then just want to open up a bit the discussion and look beyond hydrogen. And here, what's interesting to understand is that the energy transition in the end is bringing opportunities beyond hydrogen. And that's because the global industrial landscape is evolving as new centers of low cost, low carbon energy are emerging. And here the Middle East has a unique opportunity to attract these energy intensive industries like base chemicals, mining, metal production into the region, because the Middle East will be able to provide competitive energy and electricity prices. So here, what's really at stake is not just pursuing the hydrogen opportunity, but actually industrializing, localizing new industries in the Middle East as part of the energy transition. So that concludes my opening speech. And I think, I don't know, Molly, if we're opening for questions now. If so, happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Doblas, for your very comprehensive and statistical sharing, which clearly demonstrates the immense hydrogen potential and opportunities that lie ahead of globe and especially the MENA region. While the audience is digesting your slides and typing out questions, may I raise maybe 2 questions from my side?
Please.
Yes, Mr. Doblas, in your presentation, you mentioned that global demand for low carbon hydrogen needs to reach around 340 million tons per annum by 2050, representing significant growth potential. Additionally, the shift of the industry towards countries of low-cost energy sources will also stimulate domestic economy, making countries more willing to invest in hydrogen business. If you were the government from a production country, what do you think could be the most efficient policy in helping accelerating the development?
Excellent question. I'll probably focus on three things. The first one is facilitating the supply, because we're firmly convinced that there is a first mover advantage. So we need to make sure that the MENA countries are able to attract the supply, to build the supply. So that means potentially providing some sort of incentives, facilitating the access to the land and the permitting that we see is a clear bottleneck in renewable projects. Here, there's a lot of land, so let's make it available as easily as possible. And for instance, what Oman is doing with the public auction process is very interesting, providing more general admin support, and then the shared infrastructure. If the countries are ambitious in their hydrogen opportunity and will be developing many projects, there is clear economies of scale in sharing infrastructure between projects. So those are the things I would do to capture the first move advantage. So that's first point. Second, I would start to think from to develop a comprehensive industrial strategy. It's not just about hydrogen. As I mentioned at the end, there's a broader industrial reshaping that is at stake here, and hence the countries need to develop a coherent industrial and economic strategy to attract new industries that will not just be hydrogen consumers, but that could benefit from the low carbon electricity. And finally, maybe use the government-to-government relationships to help the project secure the offtake. So there's a number of governments that are willing to speak to Middle East countries or that are setting up aggregators to procure gas, but eventually to procure hydrogen. And that could be an interesting play.
Yes. Also, as you mentioned, during this growth phase, developers may face a lot of challenges, such as the conservative procurement attitude in the hydrogen demand sector, and also the rising external costs. If you were a developer, what do you think should be the best business strategy to adopt?
It's the million-dollar question or the billion-dollar question. I mean, I think in the end is about, it's important that you bring all the capabilities together in your project. If you're just a, let's say, renewables developer, we're talking about integrated and complex projects. So just having the renewables capabilities is not enough. You need to have partners that bring also the downstream capabilities, maybe the infrastructure logistic capabilities. Also very important to involve the potential off-taker early on, because ideally you design and structure the project in a way that benefits that particular type of off-taker. It's not the same thing providing green hydrogen for a green steel plant and exporting green ammonia. So having the discussions with the off-taker early on are very important. And then also when you look for off-takers, focus on the most important. So think from a value chain perspective. Yes, for a steel manufacturer, procuring green steel will be more expensive, but in the end, that green steel will be used somewhere else, right? For instance, to manufacture a car, and the actual increase in the price, in the cost of a car because of using green steel is a few percentage points. I think we're increasing the cost of a car by $500. So from the end user perspective, this is not a big change. So if you take the value chain perspective, it will be much easier to secure the offtake. And find people that are willing to pay that green premium, if that makes sense.
Yes, and in addition to the government side of strategy, the business side of strategy, we also have one last question before letting you go. It's from Nalin Chanda. How do you see the financial sector offering ease of funding to encourage investment? Maybe you can touch a bit more on the financial side of the story.
Yes. Look, yes, that's a key challenge. And we see in the end the challenge with the financing is also linked to the challenge with securing the offtake. If you don't have secured an offtake, then banks are not necessarily willing to provide the financing. And here our view is that the banks will need to evolve their capabilities, the way they look at projects. Right now, they should not be requesting the same level of guarantees as a standard renewable project, which is a much more mature industry with these long-term PPAs, right? So they need to evolve a bit their risk frameworks, potentially also their organization, so that the team that is providing funding to these nascent industries like hydrogen or CCUS are not necessarily negatively impacted because the returns are not the same. So banks cannot be expecting to get the same guarantees from a hydrogen project as renewable. So they need to evolve also the way they look at these projects, and not just wait for the projects to come with a 20-year offtake.
Thank you, Ms. Doblas, for your very informative sharing. And as you can see from our Q&A box, there are still 5 questions unanswered. So I would appreciate if you can stay longer and address the audience questions.
Will do my best, yes.
Thank you. And upcoming next, I would like to warmly welcome our distinguished guest speaker, Dr. Nikunj Gupta, Vice President, New Energies Technical and Projects of ADNOC Group, to share ADNOC's roadmap to global leadership in low-carbon hydrogen. Dr. Nikunj, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a privilege to address you all today at a time when our industry is under spotlight like never before, and the world's effort to decarbonize gather steam. Hydrogen is being viewed as one of the most promising alternatives to decarbonization in several sectors, but particularly heavy industries. Uh, Quickly introducing myself, my name is Nikunj Gupta. I'm Vice President, New Energies Technical and Projects in ADNOC's New Energy business. So let's start with ADNOC. I mean, I think, of course, clearly ADNOC's history is hydrocarbons, but its future is a lot more diverse. And what you see on this slide is not just our portfolio in sort of oil and gas. We have 4.5 million barrels of production today, and a lot of gas, 11 plus BCF. LNG about 6 MTPA, and another 5 MTPA of chemicals. So these are really, really large volumes. But what you also see is our future here, which is we're targeting up to 100 gigawatt of renewable capacity by 2030, and green hydrogen 1 million tons per year by 2030. Both kind of put us in the leadership spot globally. And I think these are targets, so I just want to highlight that. But also, I mean, what's not shown here is blue hydrogen, blue ammonia, which is another significant volume, about 0.4 MTPA of blue hydrogen, via blue ammonia and other carriers that we're targeting. So really significant ambition, which puts us in the leadership spot. And my predecessor Javier did talk about UAE strategy, and you saw again significant volumes there for 2050 with leadership ambition from the country perspective. Also talking about ADNOC itself, earlier this year, we announced $15 billion of investment in decarbonization, focusing on the decarbonization sector, which is carbon capture, electrification, CO2 absorption, and other investment in hydrogen and renewables. Another landmark milestone that we announced earlier this year is we brought forward our net zero ambitions to 2045, sort of an industry first for our sector. Everyone else is 2050 and beyond, but we are targeting to get to net zero by 2045. So that's really kind of setting us on the course of the energy transition well underway at ADNOC. Now I'll switch to hydrogen. We already make 300,000 tons of hydrogen per year. That gives us a vast background in the space. That's basically a lot of experience. What we show here on this slide in particular, and I think there's a bit of a sort of confusion between the slides, is sort of the cost of basically the different ways to make hydrogen, and then what we're showing here is that the low carbon hydrogen, which is sort of blue and green hydrogen, they are really 2 or 4 times the cost of incumbent fuel today, and thereby there's an affordability gap in terms of how we can sort of provide it to the market. So it's a key challenge, and one of the key challenges that we see in the hydrogen sector today, and this is the one we must address. Next slide, please. So one of the key, I'm sort of the way this is sequenced is that first let me talk about the challenges that we see with relation to industry, and the second part of this would be what is ADNOC doing to kind of respond to these challenges. Again, one of the key challenges is that it's a very nascent market in hydrogen, right? And where do you start? Like, what's the first thing you do? It's a chicken and egg dilemma because the markets are not there, and the supply of hydrogen is not really scaled yet. And so that makes for a complex problem between various stakeholders, public, private, and industry, which we need to kind of solve together. And I'll show you an example of down the line in terms of what ADNOC is doing to sort of address this chicken and egg dilemma. Next slide, please. So also much like natural gas, hydrogen also is a very light molecule. Yeah, and one would understand that in the future also, even when we account for renewable resources, it is still a mismatch in terms of the energy demand as well as where the energy supplies are. So pretty much you see the demand centers of energy are far, far away from where the energy must be supplied from. Can you please stick to this? Yeah, thank you. Um, and so thereby, one needs to move hydrogen long distance when hydrogen is being viewed as a low carbon carrier. Now, hydrogen has got the same problem as gas, where it's not easy to transport, so you need to convert it into a variety of carriers, and there are a variety of them to kind of move across. Ammonia, for example, is commercially practiced today. It's commercially available. It's traded in vast quantities. So that's very much developed. However, the use of ammonia is not as much developed. So it's more an issue on the utilization end. Whereas the other carriers, such as liquid organic hydrogen carriers, are still at sort of smaller scale. Scale needs to develop there, and cost needs to come down. So those are some of the key challenges associated with moving hydrogen. Longer term, you also see, things such as sustainable aviation fuel, so green liquid fuels made out of solar power would be coming into play, but they are also not really ready for commercial yet. So in principle, this is one of the big issues with the hydrogen supply chain is really finding the right vector to be able to effectively move hydrogen long distance. Next slide, please. A key challenge that we kind of note in the industry is and what we're facing today when we're sort of supplying or developing offtake for our world scale blue ammonia project is that the standards for what is called as low carbon, for example, is not first well defined, second well accepted globally. And this is, if you imagine, is a key constraint that industry faces today, because in the end, we are building a plant for global supply, and we would like the standards of low carbon to be globally harmonized. We don't want, for example, Japan or Korea to have different standards than Europe, because then a project can only supply to only a given part of the world. That further kind of slows down the development. So this is one of the key areas where we see a lot of work needs to happen, a big challenge to be able to really usher in the hydrogen economy. And this needs to be solved at a global scale between various countries. Next slide, please. Yeah, talking about hydrogen technology, again, I think the underpinning issue here with respect to hydrogen technologies is that, the cost needs to come down. Of course, hydrogen can be made today practically, but a variety of these technologies are still in development, still to be commercialized at scale, so that, one can have a lower cost to producing hydrogen, lower cost to the hydrogen supply chain. A number of these technologies are referred to. I mean, we can take an example of electrolyzer, where still the costs are high and they're projected to come down by the end of the decade and further beyond. But electrolyzer, in particular for green hydrogen, have two major issues. One is that what we notice is there is not enough manufacturing capacity. And then, the way this is panning out to be is that the more you deploy, the cost will come down proportionate to that. So it's a scale deployment issue. And so you both need to have a manufacturing capacity and a scale deployment to kind of achieve, the targets for your electrolyzer technology. And then similar such issue that we see in the carbon capture, ammonia, I mentioned that, it's kind of can be supplied globally, but cannot be easily utilized. So ammonia cracking is another technology that's being looked at, and that needs to reach commercial scale. So pretty much, across the boards, the issue that needs to be addressed on the hydrogen technologies front is to be able to scale up and cost reduce those technologies. Next slide, please. So switching gears now to ADNOC, and what are we doing to kind of address this problem? What are we doing to usher in the hydrogen supply chain, hydrogen economy? We have progressed on a number of these fronts that I just talked about. First of all, starting with our country, UAE is blessed equally well with natural gas and renewable resources. I mentioned about our existing hydrogen capacity, so the infrastructure is already there in place. Scalable infrastructure for hydrogen pipelines, hydrogen supply. We also, have the world scale CCUS plant in operational. That's 0.8 million tons of carbon capture already happening since 2016. That's the Al Riyadh. So plenty of experience and infrastructure also on the CCUS side. All this different dimensions set up ADNOC really well to basically thrive in this energy transition towards hydrogen. Next slide, please. So for us, it's like a practical approach, and maybe can detail more, right? Indeed, there's a chicken and the egg dilemma that I mentioned. So we kind of taking scalable steps to kind of getting towards the hydrogen transition. We are deploying low carbon hydrogen first. It's more commonly known as blue, but we're going on a sort of a transition approach from blue to green. Because I mean, as well known, green hydrogen today is more expensive. So we try to make this transition an affordable energy transition. So we would go with low carbon hydrogen commercial scale deployment first while we're developing green, and we hope to see the green hydrogen supply chain costs come down, become competitive with blue or low carbon hydrogen relatively soon. We've already deployed several demonstration cargoes. We have sent cargoes of blue ammonia to Japan and Korea, also Europe. And the objective is that those cargoes is not really to not only to de-risk the supply chain, but also for the customers, off-takers to be able to use ammonia in their applications such as power, such as DNOx and so on. Yeah, so testing new application around ammonia helps us de-risk the supply chain. Also, what's very well known is that we have already broken ground on our commercial scale million ton per year of blue ammonia facility that's in Taziz. And we hope this to be the first blue ammonia facility commercial scale blue ammonia facility coming online. Next slide, please. Talking about our sort of green, renewable ambitions and how we are kind of materializing those. So ADNOC has a significant investment in Masdar, which is the UAE powerhouse national champion for both renewable power and renewable hydrogen. We have announced the capacity targets, which are industry leading, 100 gigawatt of renewable by 2030. And up to 1 million tons per year of green hydrogen by 2030. Both really, really significant, as I mentioned before. And there's not a lot of time, between now and then. And we're really looking at tens of billions of dollars of investment to realize this ambition. Next slide, please. Trying to speed up. Also on the new technologies front, and here example on the carbon capture and sequestration side. So we're doing two different extremes of sequestration technology assessment. So on one hand, we have tested, really the first pilot globally of mineralization in Fujairah. So here, what you do is you put CO2 in the ground and it converts into a solid rock for permanent storage. And so there is no risk of, call it CO2 leakage in this new approach. On the other extreme, we have also we are testing and will be, shortly operational for first fully sequestered carbon, and this will be in saline aquifer. So this is really the best known approach to doing commercial scale sequestration. So this will be also operational before the end of the year. So these are really two exciting new pilots to deploy technology that we need for low carbon hydrogen supply chain. Next slide, please. This just shows you the snapshot of our partners. We're building global supply chains, and we're working with partners in Japan and Korea on a variety of carriers. We're working with German partners on ammonia cracking. We are working on liquid hydrogen with Japan, with Kawasaki. It's been well announced, and also what's maybe not shown here by way of pictures is building capacity in UAE itself to be able to build electrolyzers, and that's a partnership between Strata, which is a UAE company, and John Cockrell. So we're looking forward to that as well. I'd like to jump to the next slide. Again, I think this is probably known to everyone on this webinar today. This is a long value chain that we see for blue and green hydrogen, and a variety of carriers, variety of options, and the way we sort of thrive across the value chain is we have a variety of partnership in cases which are specific only to one part of the supply chain, such as just production, but also we have partnership in cases which go supply chain wide, so all the way from production to transportation to utilization. And also, as Javier mentioned before, that the real kind of way to solve the chicken and the egg dilemma today is indeed by the way of partnership, particularly with off-takers when we're talking about large-scale commercial projects. Also, another new collaboration that I'd like to announce is the one we are doing with Toyota, BMW, Linde, and Alphotem Motors, where we're launching the first high-speed hydrogen refueling station in UAE, and that should be again operational before the end of the year. And this is really the crucial step to set up hydrogen mobility in the UAE. So this will be the launch pad for that. Again, demonstrating our kind of ambition to kind of bring hydrogen widespread across a variety of applications. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is just sort of list of our announced partnership, and what you like I mentioned is kind of some cases production specific, but others it's across the supply chain, and there are a lot more that are not being announced and are not here. But yeah, we're working with all relevant global major players in the space. I think that's it. If you can go to the next slide. Yeah. So as Mazda and ADNOC kind of bring in the ambitions to kind of low carbon and green hydrogen, we hope the energy transition globally is truly underway. At that point, I'll finish my my speech, and thank you very much. We'll take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Nikunj, for your very kind presentation. ADNOC's low carbon journey towards serving global clients is certainly impressive. As we wait for more audience questions, I would also like to firstly ask ours, if I may.
Please go ahead.
So in your presentation, you mentioned blue, green, CCS. These are all technologies complementing ADNOC's net zero approach. But in terms of your priorities, maybe you can share with us your sequence.
Yeah, I mean, I think also mentioned in my presentation, we are of course doing both blue and green. Yeah, and we would like to be color agnostic. We call it low carbon hydrogen, and we think the definition is based on the intensity of the carbon rather than the color. Yeah, so we'd like to stay away from the rainbows of colors. But the way we see it happening is that the low carbon hydrogen, or so-called blue, is much more competitive, I mean lower cost today, and I think that's what markets can afford, and that's what commercially can be done at large scale. While sort of the green hydrogen, by way of cost reduction in the electrolyzer space and and maybe renewable power as well, is going to come down the cost curve. So we see this as a transition journey from a low carbon blue hydrogen to green. Now, having said that, we're of course also doing commercial scale green hydrogen projects today, only where markets are kind of, like for example, Europe has a preference to, be taking more green hydrogen. I mean, the regulations are supporting more green hydrogen in Europe. So we're doing projects there as well. It's really what the markets are demanding. But we do see that on a, longer term, and a balanced view, that it is a blue transition to green kind of an approach that gets played out.
Yes, certainly there is a growing interest about the demand. There are projects that are technology oriented, and there are more projects that are demand oriented. And people wonder, where is the demand and in what format? For example, it will be in sustainable aviation fuel, in ethanol, in sting fuels, in liquid hydrogen, for example. What's your perspective on the demand trending and what production formats are most viable in your perspective?
Okay, good. So I think maybe let me try to color the demand, and I think there are two parts to your question: demand and sort of what hydrogen vectors. If you look at the demand, I think that what we're seeing is mostly a kind of demand coming from the Asian market, Japan and Korea in particular. And when I'm talking about demand, it's mostly kind of as we see it, which is more international supply chain, so import export, like ADNOC is supplying to other markets globally. So Japan, Korea, and then also we started to see a lot of pull from Europe as well. Now, I think there's a lot of interest in these markets, but then the real demand is defined by the support that is available for the local domestic industry in these countries to be able to afford, right? Because of course low carbon hydrogen is not the same as your natural gas. It's way more expensive, and they need to be supported to kind of make this transition. So these are the markets where we're seeing import export sort of demand, but they need to be supported. Again, the support is coming through in Japan and Korea. We see contract for difference kind of an approach, and Europe is also going that way. And there's also renewable energy directive RED 2, RED 3 that's coming in Europe. So regulations are kind of following to support this market. Now, sustainable aviation fuel is an important area, and also in a hydrogen vector that you mentioned, because I believe the global mandate is around 10%. So it's SAF by 2030. And so that is what is driving towards. I think if that's a case of actually supply constrained scenario, this is one market where there's a lot of ask, 10% adoption, but then there are not enough supplies of sustainable aviation fuel today. Then that's mainly because if you make it the way it should be made, it is quite expensive. So I think those supply chains are developing. So in terms of the vectors, I think again, ammonia is the one we are commercializing today because it's commercially possible, and the others we are developing liquid hydrogen and liquid organic hydrogen carriers. They need to go up in scale.
Yes, and the last question to you is about the offtake. Perhaps it's a little bit tricky. So are you seeing increase in offtake agreements being signed for low carbon hydrogen produced in MENA, as Mr. Javier Doblas explained in his presentation? For the demand side, there's a reluctance to sign contracts that is longer than 5 years. What might be ADNOC's approach to manage this kind of offtake?
Yeah, I think definitely would prefer longer term offtake contracts. And we are seeing some of those, in particular reference to Japan, Korea, which are some of the key markets. I believe, they have this, this support mechanism of contract for difference being awarded next year, not now, 2024. And at that point, I think the off-takers would be able to be able to sign these long-term contracts when they are awarded by the government for the support they need. So next year you'll see a lot more than what we have today. But definitely we prefer longer term off-take agreements than 5 year. And we are kind of balancing a bit in terms of, let's say, how much is 100% of the capacity should be going for long-term offtake agreement, or should we reserve some for what is called a spot market, if you will, right? I mean, because I think there are different ways you can kind of play the offtake.
Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Nikunj, for your great sharing and for your generosity in answering the questions. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And now, please join me to welcome on stage another very shining star in the MENA market, Ms. Rumasa El-Busadi, Director for Business Development of Hydrogen, who will bring to us the second round auction in Oman. Ms. Rumasa, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Molly. I'll just share my screen and then we can go ahead with our presentation. Just confirming if you're able to see my screen.
Yes.
Fantastic. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and a big thank you to Molly and the team for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'll be here speaking about specifically Hydrome's round 2 auction that we're currently actively on specifically. Starting off with why hydrogen and why we decided as Oman to kind of move into the hydrogen space. So as many would know, Oman announced its net zero plans to achieve net zero by 2050. That was back in COP27 last year. And the vision for Oman is at the moment to kind of look into how we could transition the economy into a more hydrogen-centric economy using green hydrogen specifically. The concrete actions and that we have taken so far to kind of develop and meet that vision by 2050 is basically by allocating land at the moment. So we have 50,000 square kilometers of land that have been allocated for green hydrogen production. Just for size-wise, if you're kind of versed when it comes to Europe specifically, it's the size of the Belgium and Netherlands combined. How we give away those lands is through these auction processes, which we're currently active in the second round. We have already completed the first round. In the first round, we have awarded 5 projects with an estimated size of those projects in terms of production to reach 750,000 tons per year of green hydrogen production by 2030, with over $30 billion of investments. And also what sets us apart is the shared infrastructure bid for green hydrogen, where we as a government have taken the commitment to ensure that we will provide that for the developers that are coming in. One of the main reasons behind us moving into green hydrogen is because of strategic objectives. We have 5 or identified 5 that are crucial for us to kind of move towards that. First of all is the energy security, not only for Oman, but ensuring global demand as well for us to kind of move into a much more greener era. Diversifying the local economy, decarbonizing Oman as well to safeguard a sustainable future for the generations to come, but also creating a green hydrogen sector that is competitive for export markets and attracting FDI, and finally supporting innovation and ensuring capabilities are built, and also utilizing the capabilities that we already have in the energy sector that will be able to kind of move into the hydrogen space as well. Now, in terms of resources, Oman is one of the top countries for renewable resources, both when you look at the wind and the solar. And the map on your right actually shows you the locations of where those 50,000 square kilometers of land have been awarded for green hydrogen productions. Area number 1, which is Duqm, is where we actually completed the first round and awarded those 5 projects. And now we are active in number 2, Dhafar, and hopefully in the near future, we will be unlocking Al Jazir as well. And the ambitions for us is basically quite ambitious for production targets until 2050. The vision for Oman is to capture up to 8.5 million tons of green hydrogen production by 2050. But in the interim, by 2030, our target is around 1 million and 1.5 million tons of green hydrogen production, with electrolyzer and renewable capacity increasing as we kind of go forward towards capturing that major target of up to 8.5 million tons. And I'm sure some of you have been reading reports. The IEA report that was launched back in June actually mentions a bit about this and gives you more details in regards to how we are expected to be one of the top 10 hydrogen exporters by 2030. Our journey actually started back in 2021 with a feasibility study to kind of see if it was feasible for us to move into more of a hydrogen-centric economy. Once the study actually showed that it was feasible, we moved quite fast in regards to that. And by March of 2022 last year, we got royal directives for hydrogen specifically by setting policies, framework, strategy, as well as allocating the lands and establishing Hydrome and a Directorate General for Clean Energy and Hydrogen as well in the Ministry of Energy and Minerals. Moving forward towards the end of the year, in November 2022 is when we launched the first round of our auctions after we officially announced our hydrogen strategy in October and launched Hydrogen Oman, which is Hydrome now. And in June of this year, we actually signed the first bid rounds, which were the 5 projects that I mentioned. And immediately after that, we launched the second round of auctions that we're currently active at the moment, with a plan of hopefully awarding those projects by the end of Q1 of next year. Question that we tend to get a lot is our role in the ecosystem. So we are not the regulator and we're not the developer, but actually sit in between these two to ensure that we orchestrate the sector. So our role is basically master planning the green hydrogen sector in Oman, structuring those large scale green hydrogen projects, managing the process of how we allocate those projects, oversee their execution, but also most importantly is enabling the development of connected ecosystem industries as well, which is very crucial since we are kind of put in place with master planning the full green hydrogen sector in Oman. Some details in regards to round 1 and what we have managed to do. It has been a strong success. We had 5 continents represented with developers interested to kind of come in to develop green hydrogen projects. Over 60 companies moved into the RFQ stage, with over 20 companies at the end moving on to submitting bids. At the end, this is basically kind of showing you where we are at the value chain. So like I said, we are between the regulator and the developers. And those 5 projects that we signed kind of brought about a lot of developers and consortiums that came in. Some details about those projects are the 5 projects. So we have AMNA, which is a consortium between CIP, Blue Power Partners, and Al Khadra. And also the second public auction round, the first public auction round, and the second company that won that bid was POSCO, Samsung Engineering, and NG. In terms of legacy initiatives, and you might hear a bit of that if you are dealing in hydrogen in Oman. So legacy initiatives refer to projects that actually existed before the directives for establishing the hydrogen strategy came about, and the government decided to honor those agreements. So as a result of that, we've signed 3 agreements as well. So all those 5 projects are located in Duqm, as I mentioned, in the first area where we are, where we awarded those projects. And now we are active in the second round, which is in the south of Oman and Dhafar. It's near the port of Salalah. Some of you might be aware of that port. So the lands are around 100 kilometers away from the port. And at the moment, the process is as follows. For those who are interested, you have until the 26th of November to submit your interest and your qualifications. And following on to that, we will be for those who qualify, they receive the request for proposals, submit their bid, and hopefully by the end of Q1 of 2024, we're planning on signing those project agreements. And some key parameters for those who are interested in terms of what we offer for these developments of these projects specifically. So the duration is 47 years of a land tenure. That includes 7 years of project development and construction and 40 years of operations. There's something that we stipulate as well, which we call the Oman take, and that is land fees to be paid for the use part of the land. The land fees at the moment, for those who are wondering, is 5 cents per square meter at the moment. There's also some base royalties and upside fees, and as well corporate tax applies in this case, with back-end right for beneficiary company to come in and acquire a share, up to 20% of the project company share. In terms of the scope for the developer, it's kind of an integrated project. So we expect the developer to come in with renewable energy generation, hydrogen production, the derivative conversion or synthesis, and the offtake is on the developer. We have set as well a minimum target of hydrogen production per block, and that is 150,000 tons of green hydrogen production per block. However, with that said, in terms of the scope, the developer is not expected to kind of set in place any infrastructure in terms of pipelines. That is something that we, as the Omani government, are committed to kind of ensuring that you will have that available, lowering your CapEx quite considerably as well as a result. And some incentives as well are taking into account. We have some reduced land fees in development and construction phase. So an 80% discount during the development stage, and 100%. So you don't pay anything during the construction phase of your project. And obviously during the operation phase, you're only paying for the footprint of your project and not for the full land fee as well. In addition to that, we have an ICV incentive fee that decreases every time you increase your level of Omanization. Some details, I think I mentioned a bit about this. So in order for you to kind of go through the process of how our process system basically works is companies request an RFQ. They receive the request for qualification document. Once you fill it in and submit, you have to meet the minimum qualification criteria in order for you to move to the RFP stage. If you qualify, you will be invited to receive the RFP and then work on your project bid submission. Compliant bids need to meet the minimum bid requirements, and then we shortlist the bids and then enter into hopefully a very short negotiation and then announce the winning bids by the end of that process. I mentioned a bit about the shared infrastructure. That is something, like I said, we are committed as a government to provide. And this is basically a very quick concept or schematic of how we envisage this to be. So you would see that the renewable energy generation and green hydrogen production is way up where the block is, where the derivative synthesis is usually going to be located in the free zone and connection to the port terminals in order for you to export. So while it seems disconnected, what we're doing and our commitment is to connect you all through water pipelines. So desalination will be a desalinated water of electrolyzer quality and hydrogen production quality will be provided to you, to your blocks, in addition to the electricity transmission line, and the hydrogen pipeline will be also connected throughout these three elements that I just showed. And this is basically a schematic of how it will look like for the actual current round 2 blocks that we're having in the auction process that we're active now, with the water, as I said, the hydrogen gas and electricity transmission provided to you. And that should not fall under the developer's scope. Another question that we get asked a lot is, in terms of the common shared infrastructure, what's the timeline? Am I going to get all these pipelines in time for my project to actually be ready for commissioning? The answer is yes, it will follow exactly your timeline. So you will have everything ready by the time you're ready to commission your development and your project. For round 1, that development has already kickstarted as well. So this is basically more details, a bit more details on where the blocks actually are located in the FAR. So these are the 3 blocks that we are currently offering up for auction at the moment. So Z206, Z202, and Z207. The average speed of wind are varied between 7 to 10 meters per second. However, we're publishing news as well and details about more wind data that we just received on the blocks, with summertime winds going up to 15 meters per second, which is nearly double that amount for some of these blocks as well. And solar, I don't think I need to mention anything about Oman and solar. You get solar pretty much 365 days a year. Some other high-level overview of the blocks as well. Sizes a bit vary. Main reason behind the sizing variation there is due to the topography. Given the fact that one block is quite complex in its topography, we decided to kind of offset that by providing more land. And like I mentioned, in terms of the wind, it varies between 7 till 10, with much more higher wind speeds during the summer months because of the monsoon season, and solar radiation is spectacular as known there. And that's basically in a nutshell our round 2 and a bit about our hydrogen strategy specifically for Oman. If you're really interested, make sure to register on our auction platform. You can scan the QR code there, and then feel free to get in touch with me and connect with me as well. I'm sure the team will be able to kind of share my contact details should you need to take this conversation further. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, Mr. Masa, thank you so much for your very detailed explanation about the Omani second auction. And I believe everyone's interested and everyone's been talking about it in the whole year of 2023. Some follow-up questions from our side. The first one is the time to market. What is your projection for the pace of forthcoming projects in Oman? And do you believe that smaller scale projects could also be feasible in Omani context?
Thanks so much, Molly, for that question. So in terms of timelines, we are, as I said, we move quite fast. So we've signed those 5 agreements in June with a set timeline that they have 7 years to develop and construct. And the anticipation is that they are, at the moment, are going to be meeting those timelines with a 2030 set targets of production to kickstart for all 5 projects. And the aim is hopefully with these, hopefully up to 3 blocks that are coming online or that will be signed by next year in Q1, that we will be, Oman will be meeting that 1 million to 1.5 million target that we have set as well. In terms of small scale, definitely there is room for that in terms of like pilot scales and so on. And that is something that our investment arm of the government as well is kind of keen looking onto, specifically when it comes to the value chain, looking at various ways of electrolyzer capacity and so on, and ramping it up as we go.
Yes, and for the infrastructure, will it also be done by hydro? There's like some question from the audience.
Yes, so the infrastructure is something that the Omani government, Hydrom will be overseeing. So like I said, we're just the orchestrator. We're not really a developer, but we're making sure that that will move forward. Yes, the government is taking responsibility to ensure that that will be developed. We have already allocated national champions that will be leading that front with the timelines, as I mentioned, to be ready by the time that the developments are ready for commissioning as well.
Thank you, Mr. Masa. And the second question is really about the technology. Regarding the necessary technology, what additional future requirements do you foresee beyond the existing capabilities?
So I would say in terms of the value chain in general, there's much need for not only localization, but also building a lot of the know-how and knowledge there. I think a lot of the panelists and speakers before mentioned the need for actually kind of increasing the capacity and knowledge in terms of that. So for Oman, we're looking at the actual value chain, looking at upstream and downstream industries and how we could connect all of those, be it from the renewable energy perspective, how can we kind of set assembly in the country, to electrolyzers, how can we increase that capacity as well in the country, all the way to the downstream process of how can we ensure that other derivatives are kind of coming up as a result of that, in addition to how do we house these R&D and innovation to kind of cultivate that growing demand as well as we kind of move forward with green hydrogen.
Thank you, Mr. Masa, for your very, very kind address. I think Oman has one of the best policy mechanisms in the world, and with that, there is 100% a lot of investment interest will be coming over. And now, thank you so much once again for joining the event.
Thank you so much.
And now we come to the opportunities and the prospects of Saudi Arabia. And I would like to introduce our next speaker on stage, Mr. Dinesh Singh, leader of decarbonization and new energies at Saudi Aramco. Mr. Singh, the stage is now yours.
Can you hear me and can see me too?
Yes, I can.
So thank you very much for inviting me, and especially thanks to the previous speakers. They have given a very good details about this energy transition and decarb. Today, I'll just try to give you a very high-level view how the whole industries are moving towards, where are they now and where they're going to move in future, and what is the kind of strategy and landscape as well as think-through processes going ahead among all oil majors and the oil companies. Can you start showing my slides? Now I'm just going to tell a very high levels the way that things are moving in terms of new energy, decarb, or energy transitions. A sense of every things are happening at the moment world to reduce the carbon emissions to get 2 degree or lesser than 2 degree temperature rise. And every company is trying their best to make sure that they are in the part of the process and they take their social obligations. Now, I just go to the next slide, tell how oil majors are at the moment and how they're going to progress. So the first slide will tell where are we at the moment. This is simple slides. But again, now for all oil majors, the clean energy is appearing as a new energy market. At the moment, it is mostly dominated by hydrocarbon fuel, coals, and other aspect of fuels. But the clean energy market is coming up. So first thing major oil trying to do, all major oil, including Saudi Aramco, to get ahead in the market, take the leadership in that market. How to get that leadership in the market? Basically, the first main item is to remove carbon dioxide from the fuel. What you're doing at the moment is we got hydrocarbons and remove hydrocarbons and send the fuel without hydrocarbons. So CCS, carbon capture and sequestration, is playing a major role. And just to share with the people around here that I just finished one of the largest integrated CCS project sitting in the UK for 2 years' time, and which will be very soon operational in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So what you're trying to do here is, of course, everybody knows how to make the blue ammonia. But to get blue ammonia, we need to remove carbon dioxide and capture and store it underground for the millions of years. Make sure that it's not coming out. So you need to have very, very sound reservoirs, same as a gas is sitting underground for 1 million years. Carbon dioxide has to sit in 1 million years. There is a possibility in 60 years' time that carbon capture become a source of carbon for all future hydrocarbon, or I can say benzene or chemicals productions, urea, all sort of stuff. So that could be future asset at the moment. It could be possible. So to get there, get the clean energy export, we need to have a carbon capture sequestration. For that, we need a reservoir. Only very few countries has a reservoir. As my previous panelist said, that there are two kinds of reservoir. One is a saline aquifer, which is expensive propositions. Second is permanent CCS solution, which is a basalt formations, which is calcium oxide, carbon dioxide react with that and become calcium carbonate. So there is no leakage issues. But still, there is a lot of, like back in Australia, like Santos and everyone is doing, they're using their depleted gas reservoir. And that depleted gas reservoir require less injection pressures. This means carbon capture cost reduced significantly. Porosity is high. So the cost is a driver for a CCS. And with the cost driver, the main element in the cost driver is basically upstream. Upstream means how easily to capture, not capture, to store the CO2, like based on the formation, underground formations, reservoir porosity, depth, and the pressure is very important factor in this. So at this stage, people are playing safe, going for the saline aquifer, which is quite deep. That's what exactly oil major is doing. This slide tells this real story. What is happening now is, I don't want to, because we are in hydrocarbon business, we don't want to do the business which basically challenge the core business. But at the same time, we have a social responsibility, as well as we have to be a leader into the new emerging business market, energy market, which is clean energy market. Now, of course, that needs decarbonizations. So we are at the moment planning decarb our fuel as well as decarb scope 2 emissions also. What is scope 2 sales? Like you produce ammonia and hydrogen, we need to have energy. And that energy comes from somewhere by burning fuel. We're trying to make sure that that fuel burning also has carbon capture to make sure scope 2 emission is reduced to nil or minimum. Now, as you know, that clean energy at the moment, blue ammonia has different grades, like a 70% grade, like 30% still emission is happening associated with that, only 70% capture. The future is basically making it more robust, going from 70% of green ammonia to 100% green ammonia. So please go to the next slide. And that's the next transition, which is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years' time. Now here's, before I said like people are focusing on CCS, oil majors, very less on green power in that equation. But now things are moving faster. People are moving towards the green power also. They're bringing green power also in equation, renewables, you can say. What renewable is doing is still, we are having a CCS for decarbonize our low fuel energy, clean energy. low carbon energy. At the same time, scope 2 emission, like power required to run this facility, they're looking for having green power using solar and winds together. Now, why I'm saying together, it's a very daunting task to find the best location of the winds and solar together to maximize the capacity factors, avoid the grid factors and overloading and everything. It's a very daunting task. And some of the places are really blessed with, for example, Niam in Saudi Arabia and West Coast in Australia. Unique proposition because in the daytime, they have a lot of sun. And when the suns decline, the evening time, the wind picks up. So basically, it's a continuous supply of energy. And it's one term called capacity factor. These two location capacity factor is almost 56 to 60% to 65%, which is very reasonably very high to compete renewable against the all hydrocarbon-based power generations if storage is not there. We have been talking a lot about how to minimize the storage cost and everything. But again, I'm not going in detail. So next step, what oil major is going to do is in maybe 5 years' time, or maybe less, maybe even faster, maybe a little bit delayed, depends on how the world is reacting on emissions control and energy temperature rise, global temperature rise. And we can see here, renewable will try to be a forefront to decarbonize each of the country inside. But however, sending clean energy overseas, still the most cost effective will be CCS, blue. So there is a lot of competition going on. And you know why the blue is saying? Because in the worldwide today, we cannot replace the whole energy in one day by clean energy. At the same time, global energy demand also increasing. So there is two front of challenge. So sustainable energy development, clean energy development is also a challenge. So that's why the transition is going to be slow. Maybe faster, depends on the reactions of the world and people. But that's what the next stage is going to happen. The next stage is the next slide, and which expected in next 15 years' time. Go to the next slide, please. Can you hear me? Go to the next slide. So here is basically ultimately going to be a case. And because by the time, in 15 years' time, the 10 years' time, you find that the efficiency of the solar panel, the electrolyzer efficiencies, and the different type of electrolyzer coming, energy losses, power losses, that making green very much in neck to neck in terms of at par in the cost. So the things are moving towards that direction. Like in the future, in the 10, 15 years down the line, I can see here, of course, CCS will be a major role in the clean energy exports. At the same time, you find a competing clean energy arm, which is called the green ammonia, and that comes from renewable. So there could be a good blend of example. For example, the company like Saudi Arabia, which has a very strong infrastructure at the moment, a lot of knowledge about the fossil fuel management and everything, big infrastructure available. So synergy of the existing infrastructure with all renewables as well as the clean energy aspects. So there could be a competing, balance between the blue and green. That basically slowly you can find in maybe, I don't know how long, but in a few decades time, the green become one of a major challenger as well as maybe replacer of the blue. And that will be more clean, more green, less legacy for the future management. For example, in CCS, we have to manage the CCS sequestered CO2 for a long time. So that kind of stuff is happening. So in future, in 20 years time down the line, I see, for example, in Oman or Saudi Arabia or other countries like this, where we have major oils, local energy demand will be met by renewable. Still, it is very hard, difficult. It can be expensive to export renewable, but by the time we have technology development, technology changes may allow us the electricity supply through the cables, interstate cable, intercountry cables. At the same time, maybe at the moment we are talking about blue ammonia, blue hydrogen, could be easy to transport, same as LNG, could be cheaper. And could be new technology come, new source will come, rather than sending renewable through ammonia in form of ammonia and hydrogen, could be new way of transporting it. Maybe in terms of big batteries, we don't know. That is going to happen. And that's a lot of effort is going on in Australia or overseas to make the battery more efficient, more cost effective, more sustainable, and easy to transport. And that's exactly where where the clean energy called green ammonia will basically lead the whole world. But again, all major oil majors are trying to be a part of that phenomena. They still want to be a major green energy suppliers, and they're trying to change their investment. They're trying to regroup themselves, trying to transition there. That's what's happening. These are 3 different phases I can see is taking place, and it's very challenging world. Next 5 years, the first benchmark, 15 second benchmark, and 25, 30 years, third benchmark, third slide is the kind of phenomena that's going to happen. With this, I can end my presentations, and I'm happy to answer any questions if required. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Singh, for your very kind address. I just want to get your key message first clear. So you think economics is the deciding factor for developing blue hydrogen over green hydrogen, right?
Economy is the key, and how to change the economy the 2 ways. Either we can go really for very high efficiency solar, batteries, and make the economics better, or we can tax carbon. So carbon credit, a carbon tax, which is not been enforced yet worldwide. The day it will be enforced, then you can find that green is making a lot more sense, which is not happening yet. I don't know when it will happen. But of course, any business will not go grow under without having economics behind it. Though we are taking steps, investing, like CCS investment is like a no value, money is coming back to that, no revenue coming, but still people are getting ready for the future challenges. So of course, economics will play a very, very major role, are the key roles you can say, in the sense.
And from your perspective, what is the expected timeline to get a real start on either clean or green hydrogen in Saudi Arabia or in Saudi Aramco?
Saudi Aramco already going a big way, and it is all published everywhere. And you can see ministers and big our management team coming and telling the people, because we know that we are not just have to be green, but we have to look for the new market also. So our focus is twofold. One is, of course, make us green so that we are acceptable, respectable to the people, the way we are tilled as a major energy supplier. And at the same time, we'll have to eye on the new market coming up, that's green energy market. So we are not just import in-house use, but also export growth. We are working on 2 fronts together. So the NEOM is one of the example, like more than $4 billion invested on the green energy. At the same time, one of the largest CCS integrated project I just finished in the UK is happening. Then we are expanding beyond, nobody can imagine the capacity of CCS. We really want to make sure that the green, or I can say low carbon market, we can still be a leader there.
Yes, and back to the demand problem. As you mentioned just now, for the Saudi Arabia local market, it will be mainly occupied by renewables as the main decarbonization option, like the main decarbonization approach. And for maybe clean hydrogen or green hydrogen, it will be used for export. Do you foresee any local demand for such green or blue hydrogen projects?
So, for example, like, there's no point of making a blue hydrogen, a green hydrogen, and use it inside, because it's easy and more cost competitive to use our hydrocarbons and have a CCS, or directly supply electricity from the grid to the grid from the solar panel. And we're looking at an opportunity like how to minimize the storage cost, because at this moment, storage of green is very expensive. We have a lot of infrastructure, like we're looking into an option where we can make a green hydrogen and use our existing infrastructure like the gas pipe network to blend it to make as a cheap storage. We're looking for all those options. But of course, as you know, it has been accepted by the Saudi Arabia and Aramco to be net zero by 2050 Aramco and Kingdom by 2060. And we have different levels they're using to get there. Of course, CCS is one aspect. One level is basically to decarbonize ourselves, including scope 3 emission, we're basically exporting a lot of crude and petrols and everything overseas. So including everything, we are trying to force to make a net zero scope 1, scope 2, plus looking for scope 3 emission reduction also. So if I understand his questions, of course, we are going for a twofold approach. Of course, decarbonize yourself, but decarbonize the way it should be the best for us. And at the same time, we have a clean energy for the people at a very competitive price, because we have a big customer base, and we have to make sure that our customer is satisfied. in terms of getting energy at the right price and at right incentives.
Yes, and one last question before I let you go. The same question to ADNOC. So are you seeing any increase in offtake agreements being signed for low carbon hydrogen produced in MENA? And what key developments do you see in Saudi or Middle East that will be the main driver for clean hydrogen consumption?
So I can tell you one example, like what happens the same, like, happened with the LNG. All LNG project, even I was in Australia and developed 3 LNG projects in 2013, 14. They have already been offtake agreement upfront before investment. A similar kind of thing is happening here in this case also. Every blue hydrogen, green hydrogen facility will have, is going to have, or having at least a very solid, at least 70 to 80% offtake agreement for long term. And of course, who will need this? For example, Japan. Japan can use hydrocarbons and have a CCS, but unfortunately, Japan doesn't have the space for CCS storage. Those countries doesn't have storage space, and they have a lot of energy demand because they are the advanced countries. Their energy consumption is high. They are looking for those carbon-free energy source. And that's where the whole market is coming. Korea, Japan, maybe China, India, everywhere. Europe, in the winter time, energy demand will grow. Something is like cooking up a whole entire world, and exactly it's going the same way LNG is being traded at the moment. Same like liquefied natural gas is similar kind of phenomena, similar kind of equation, similar kind of chemistry and the economics.
Understood. And with that, I thank you so much, Mr. Nash, for joining us and for sharing this wonderful speech.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for listening to me.
So following the Middle East, let's have our attention on excitement in North Africa. First joining us is Mr. Khalid Najib, CEO of Hydrogen Egypt.
Yes. Hello. So we're actually having a real energy transition and energy security issue at hand because the electricity cuts in Egypt. The electricity in Egypt cuts for 2 hours a day because we don't have enough gas as a result of several issues, including, of course, the regional politics, the issues going on in the region right now. So that has forgive us for showing up a few seconds late. A little bit about ourselves. So Hydrogen Egypt was formed during COP27. Our signature project was with the Ministry of Petroleum and the Port of Antwerp with an EU grant. And in this project, we put together the IMO compliance program for the Ministry of Petroleum and for Egypt. The reason I bring this up was that was actually the start of the hydrogen journey for us, and probably also here in Egypt. This is where we saw the potential of hydrogen with several shipping lines going back several years, actually, where they were using hydrogen, of course, methanol, ammonia, and others, and blending fuels to lower the sulfur content of the fuel. So that's actually what started the sort of like hydrogen, let's say, journey in Egypt, where Egypt was looking at hydrogen in ports and in transport and mobility. And then leading up to COP27, Egypt, of course, by then had nearly, I think, 27% of its energy from renewable energy. At that time, also, as we know, the energy shocks, which obviously was right after demand and the supply didn't pick up in Egypt as well, and that's, I think, where we saw the decrease in supply, increase in prices, and then of course the events in Ukraine, which was it was also a shock to our economy here in Egypt and also to our energy equation as well. So around that too, we saw a lot of developers coming into Egypt in hydrogen and ammonia projects in Egypt. Hydrogen Egypt acts as a platform for awareness, for B2B activity. We work very closely with all the developers whether in framework stage, which are 9, and then MOU stage, you actually have up to 30 different MOUs for hydrogen export from Egypt, and of course in the form of ammonia. So let's also look at sort of the other factors that put Egypt on this on this map for green hydrogen ammonia export. So also Egypt has a very well developed infrastructure, that's ports, already ammonia export and production. So Egypt produces 6 million tons of ammonia and exports quite a bit of it. So Egypt's very well positioned already with especially in the early days, as we know, the export of hydrogen would be via ammonia. And there's a lot of cooperation here in Egypt between the importing ports of Rotterdam and Antwerp and other European ports. We'll speak quite a bit about the export projects, but I also wanted to highlight Egypt's local demand potential blue hydrogen, ammonia, and other energy vectors. So here we see something very, very important. This is actually the petrochemical pipeline and oil and gas network for Egypt. So all what you see there are pipelines, refineries, LPG plant processing, LNG plant, and it starts from sort of the middle, which is Cairo, and then if you go up towards the left, you will see that's Alexandria, and then towards the right is Port Said. So this is actually something like 300 kilometers by 300 by 300. So it's a actually very dense the delta of Egypt, So that's where you have 60-70% of the economy, the GDP, the population, overlaid by this layers, let's say, of the gas network, pipelines, petrochemical plants, or fertilizer plants, LNG, and so on. So just to give you a few numbers there, for example, Egypt has something close to 2 million tons of gray hydrogen that would ultimately could be significant amounts of that could be replaced by low carbon or blue hydrogen and green as well. I also mentioned that in this slide that you see, we also have the 6 billion tons of ammonia already being produced. That's gray ammonia. So these all present a number of opportunities for developers, for technology, for different points along the value chain to connect with, and the hydrogen economy to connect with here in Egypt. You can also add another layer, which is the ports, which was in the previous slide. So up at Alexandria, for example, you have a very large port in Damietta, also, which is kind of halfway in the middle of this triangle up on the top. And of course, the very famous Port Said, and then going down south to Suez, and then Ain Sokhna, which we will come back to a little later. So this we always is often the sort of interesting and very visible and much talked about part for Egypt is the export part. But we're actually working on a study now which would give an indication of the potential local demand for green and blue hydrogen in Egypt, which is significant. Again, we have a huge market too, also, which could be the transport and mobility market and other applications of 100 million people. Again, 60% of them, let's say, so at least 50-60 million, located in this dense area of the delta. So this is something really important I wanted to highlight and bring to the attention here of this wonderful meeting we're having online and presentation. Again, the favorable factors, the location, renewables, we have lots of water desalination capabilities, the recent policies and regulations. Egypt has a National Hydrogen Council. We issued several tranches of tax incentives, tax breaks, also competitive tariffs, and so on. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, because there's so many, but I will come back to the summary of the project. So if you can just move these a little quicker. So I will speak while you're moving these slides. These are just these are the 9 framework agreements. So just if you can keep these moving along, and we will come to the summary page shortly. So the idea here too is these MOUs are most of them now are in really advanced stages of studies. A number of these projects catered to them, and some of them have also reached some very advanced stages of the of tariff negotiation with the government. We will expect soon to probably see some final agreement FIDs of these projects coming soon. We saw also Maersk in one of these slides. Maersk is a methanol, green methanol project as well. Let's keep moving through the slides, please. Yeah. As I mentioned, Amea Power and most of the large developers have signed these MOUs. EDF from France. Okay, we can keep going. Yeah, Total, Masdar, and Hassan Alem. These are very large. These are some of the very large MOUs. We'll see that in the summary table coming up soon. Please keep going. So this is a summary of these MOUs. You see one page here with Total, Maersk, Amea, Masdar having 2 projects. If we can stop right here at this slide, please. So there you see DEMI, there's the Highport Consortium, Siemens, Fertiglobe, Scatec, and Fortescue. Egypt in general has a lot of land, very good flat land for solar power with good characteristics of the radiation and all that. And also we are like some of the unique countries like Oman and Morocco and others that have the wind and solar combination. So we have a number of areas with more than 10 meters per second wind. So we have the favorable conditions for wind and solar. But yeah, if you can maybe go back one slide, just we can come back to that summary page for a second to round out the discussion. Yeah, there we go. Required, something like 80 gigawatts. The renewable energy would be 200. You can see, these old projects, they are supposed, the idea is most of them start with a pilot project phase of 100 megawatts or so, and then they scale up. And that's again where Egypt has launched a number of incentives, tariff reductions, and policies to encourage the investors and developers to come into the Egyptian market. And by the way, the door is still open, so it's a standard format. The developers can submit a concept proposal to the Ministry of Electricity, or actually probably now the National Hydrogen Council. And then it's reviewed, and there's a standard MOU which is signed with the developers, and so the door is open. Egypt continues to receive many proposals for these large-scale projects, including recently, actually, at the Brick and Road Initiative conference in Beijing. So there we had China Energy sign a very large scale MOU for green hydrogen ammonia production in Egypt. So we covered also, the local demand. We covered the export side of it, and also their transport and mobility will happen, but we think a little later, simply because there is actually fuel is subsidized here. So the subsidies are being removed, and the price of hydrogen is coming down. So when these two sort of meet at a point in the future, we expect to see also transport and mobility to happen in Egypt as well. A few points to close out our presentation. We are also working on an Egyptian Hydrogen Valley proposal, which is part of the new program. And we had a Hydrogen Egypt Summit a couple of months ago where we announced this Hydrogen Valley, which would be, say, to connect Cairo and Alexandria with an ecosystem of producing and using hydrogen and integrating with the heavy industry, which is, we're seeing a lot of activity around that because of the steel plants in Egypt are mostly DRI plants, for example, and also the cement industry of a number of cement producers that export cement to Europe. So between the cement and steel and fertilizer and the 6 different products that fall under CBAM, so we're starting to see activity also in decarbonization of heavy industry. So this is where we believe the Egyptian Hydrogen Valley, which is called the Ra Valley, the Ra is the god of the sun and water. We expect this to be, we actually launched it in the Hydrogen Egypt Summit, and more progress to be announced in the coming months. We also have a concept called Hydrogen Village, Egyptian Hydrogen Village. So Egyptian Hydrogen Village is also small-scale production applications. This is something oriented towards, we have a lot of legacy diesel engines, generators, and so on. So the idea there is to actually run dual fuel engines, diesel hydrogen. This is something which is probably unique, sort of, let's say, to the global south as well. So that's an initiative we're pushing out as well. And of course, looking at things like awareness, skilling up women in hydrogen. So Hydrogen Egypt works on a number of these cross-cutting initiatives. We will be at Hydrogen Week in Brussels and in COP28. There we will be, again, covering all the points we talked about, in addition to initiatives like, hydrogen pipelines in the Mediterranean, hydrogen infrastructure coordination, South-South also, looking at exporting hydrogen ammonia to the Southern European ports as well, of course, in addition to what's going on in Northern European ports. And last point too, like my colleague, I heard several of our colleagues mention in their presentations, we are increasingly in a very fragmented world when it comes to, of course, geopolitics, but that's not our point today. The point today is energy transition. And on that too, we call for unified specifications, plans, sharing of data. You have the US and with its own specifications, data plans, the EU, China, India, and Asia, of course. So a country like Egypt, which looks at Asian markets and European markets, we increasingly, have that challenge of looking at different specifications, regulations, policies, plans. We come to something finally too. We can also call for at least collaboration on good data sharing and coordination of infrastructure planning. This is something very, very important. This is something, in the energy shocks of the past in the 70s, which was a different time. Of course, you saw the world really come together on at least bare minimum sharing of information, which was like the IEA and other organizations that were created around that time. So, we believe free trade, free flow of information, data are the real answers to energy transition. So thank you for the time today. Really, we apologize about the inconvenience of not having proper power here, so we could not have the presentation in exactly the way we wanted. So again, thank you for having us here today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Khalid, for presenting to us such a wonderful speech despite all the challenges. Because there are some delays in slides when we switch from one to another, so I just want to firstly clarify what we have been talking about for the past 10 minutes. So you mentioned in your presentation there are a lot of ongoing projects and proposed renewable hydrogen projects in Egypt right now. How fast do you foresee these projects coming up? Maybe you can share with us a brief timeline about these H2 projects at large scale.
Yes, sure. So, like I said, we can also focus especially on the 9 framework agreements, which we saw that summary slide and just briefs about each project. So these projects have been in feed study stage. I would say at least half of them, so let's say 5 projects are very, very advanced, and a number of them have received their land and negotiated tariffs with the government. So we expect the final agreements and FIDs to probably see some announcements first quarter and second quarter of the year. and then you could add, say, 3 years to then start to see production. So you can, the timeline that they're talking about in some of these projects is in late 2028, 28, 29, where you can see these big volumes coming online. Having said that, there's also some initiatives that are already producing green hydrogen, like the Scatec Fertiglobe in Ain Sokhna. They have 100 megawatt. I believe the number, maybe a quarter of that or so, I'm not sure, but is already installed, producing green ammonia in an existing fertilizer plant. So we expect to see more of that happening as well. So more sort of small scale production and blending of green hydrogen in existing facilities. And you saw Scatec very active. They also have some MOUs with the fertilizer plants and the refineries to supply them with green hydrogen. So we expect those two, you can see them scale up at least with small production in the near future.
Yes, and also in your presentation, you emphasized the importance of Hydrogen Valley, and there are some movements going on right now. So is there any policy or regulation for Hydrogen Valley? How is it managed? Or it's more like an industry-led approach?
Yeah, actually, that's a very good question, because there is, of course, a national hydrogen plan in Egypt, and the executive version was published COP27, and it addresses a lot of the sort of industrial aspects and decarbonization of heavy industry and transport and mobility. But your question is right about industry driven. Actually, what we are seeing now is the industry itself, taking in steps forward because of mainly CBAM. So CBAM is really a driving factor under CBAM. Yeah.
Yes, and another question is, I think you've been asked a lot, is the competitor profile, because we also have like major producers in the region, like KSA, like UAE, like Oman, like Morocco, for example. Also, not to mention the competitors from the Oceania and North America, South America, as previously mentioned by Mr. Javier Doblas. So how cost competitive is green hydrogen or green molecules in Egypt compared to other countries in the region and in the global level?
Yeah, I think we would be on par with, especially say, I would like to say Morocco and perhaps also Namibia, Mauritania, and so on. I think then what happens there is it becomes more a question of if you have to. I would look at it also from the import side or the demand side. So there, that depends also sort of on distance, infrastructure, and different factors. So I think we all probably compete, I'd like to say, within a similar bandwidth. Then it becomes more than a question of also, let's face it, green hydrogen in absolute terms would be, as we saw on the charts, more expensive than blue and let's say gray. But with this begs the mention of a hydrogen bank and H2 Global, the mechanism in Europe, which would price and tenor difference in the demand for hydrogen. So that's where we feel like Repower EU, Hydrogen Bank, all that's going on in Europe in terms of policies and regulations and incentives would be the driving factor to make these first point-to-point export import of hydrogen possible. It's kind of like the early days of LNG as well. It took a lot of effort from the government's side to make those first LNG transactions happen. Same, you can say, many similarities between LNG and the hydrogen. So while it's important to look at the competitiveness of the price, but I think it's also very important to look at, where does that demand come from, what's driving it, and how does it become financially possible. And that's where we see, of course, with the Hydrogen Bank and H2 Global, the agency, which was formed in Germany, and Germany being, of course, a very big demand point for energy from countries like Egypt.
Yes. Yes, I truly agree that collaboration will lead to us the final success. With that, thank you so much, Mr. Khalid, for joining us. And now we come to our last but not least session, a deep dive of Morocco's hydrogen roadmap and investment opportunities. Joining us here is Mr. Murad Hajaji, Director General of Cluster Green H2. Welcome, Mr. Murad.
Okay. First, I want to thank Leader Associate for giving us this opportunity to speak about green hydrogen in Morocco. Take 1 minute to present the cluster Green H2. The cluster is an association made up for more than 80 members from the private and the public sector. And from the world of education, research, they collaborate together to create a favorable condition for the development of green. I say that our members are companies who are involved in the entire green hydrogen value chain, renewable energy producers, electrolyzers, transformation, transport, and use. And our cluster is the mission of our cluster is to involve and collaborate with all stakeholders in the value chain, in research, universities, etc. The cluster is a platform of exchange and networking, and provider of some sectorial and strategic studies, and initiator of startup, fundraiser, technology promoter, etc. As said by the previous panelists, you know that the climate objective and the zero emission ambition for different countries on the world are forcing the deployment of renewable energy at the global level. But now there is a new player who is the hydrogen. It's this molecule, very simple, is considered today as a very important vector for development of energy transition and in the coming decades. The green hydrogen represent substantial potential for reducing greenhouse gases, for decarbonation, for security supply. It can play a very important role in the global energy transition as well, and for development, economic development. And applications are very diversified. There is an industrial application, green steel, green ammonia, methanol, and derivative. In the mobility, it's a very important tool, so we can use it to win the fuel cell for mobility or direct combustion of hydrogen, and it can replace some actual fossil fuels as synthetic fuels, green ammonia, methanol, green gasoline, etc. For electricity production, it can benefit from the significant, the important potential of hydrogen storage to solve the issue of the intermittency of renewable energy. So in Morocco, we developed a roadmap in 2019. This roadmap estimates that the green hydrogen industry and its derivative in Morocco could face a demand of about 14 terawatt hour in 2030, which could reach about 67 terawatt hour in 2040, and more than 150 terawatt hour in 2050. The mass demand in the next decade will be for raw materials, and will come from probably exports of and industry, and a very small demand could appear in the transport sector. The situation in 2040 and 2050 will be different, because we expect that demand will increase mainly in the sector of transport when the synthetic fuels become more competitive compared to conventional fuels. So the necessary renewable energy capacities, in addition to those deployed now, it's very important. It will be needed to provide electricity for electrolyzer, for water desalination, for plants, for processing plants, etc. And it will be about, we estimate that it will be about 8 gigawatts in 2030, more than 35 gigawatts in 2040, and more than 70 gigawatt, in 2050. This will bring us to an installed renewable capacity in Morocco, about 70% of renewable energy in 2040, and more than 80% in 2050. And the development of this green hydrogen industry would require a total investment estimated as $1 billion between 2020 and 2050 to meet the demand potential. The green hydrogen in Morocco has a very important potential due to the cost per kilogram. There is some studies done for the Moroccan context. The German Fraunhofer Institute has identified Morocco as one of the ideal candidates for the production and export of green molecule to Europe. Our country can capture 2 to 4% of global demand of green hydrogen. The World Energy Council identified Morocco as one of the 6 countries with the strong potential of the production and export of hydrogen and green derivative. According to a study of our National Institute of Research, the costs of producing green hydrogen will be about $2.5 per kilogram in the south of Morocco. And the Aurora Energy Research said that the hydrogen exported from Morocco to Germany via gas pipeline will cost about 3.7 euro per kilogram, while that produced on German territory would cost 3.9 euro per kilogram. That's why it's an important, very important strategic project to develop in our country, and due to major assets to address this sector as a strategic is the political support of highest level of the state, the strong and diversified international framework of the country. We have a private sector who is involved in this dynamic. We have one of the best potential in the world in terms of renewable resources, wind and solar. We have an expertise in and successful deployment of renewable energy projects. A very important aspect is the desalination project, and now we have a roadmap to develop more than 50 desalination plants in Morocco. There is an infrastructure of research, of development. There is a lot of training centers for human capacity. And the geostrategical aspect is the proximity, the maritime and the gas connectivity with the European Union, and the high quality of infrastructure, ports, airports, highway infrastructure. I think another very important factor for Moroccan projects to be feasible, serious, and is the presence of key players throughout all the value chain. Here you can see that in every stage of this value chain, we have actors, the national or international actors present in Morocco in terms of producers and operators of renewable energy desalination projects. We have the same operator, the Office of Electricity, the Office of Phosphate, Mazen, etc. For production of hydrogen, we have expertise in engineering, design, and maintenance of electrolyzer, and here Jean Coqueril, Siemens, ABB, Tank etc. For storage and logistic transport and distribution, there is very important expertise in engineering, design, installation of maintenance of tanks, of storage, and in the application, we have some off-takers, potential off-takers in OCP for ammonia. We have a very important automobile industries. We have a very important player in steel, is Maghreb Steel, and others. Across this value chain, we have some strengths, but there is also some challenge. And there is, for example, in terms of technical and technological aspects, the history of renewable energy is a strength in our context. The load factor of this hybrid projects is also a strength, and the high industrialization potential is very important. The desalination plant for production, the low cost of ammonia and hydrogen, it's a very important factor. And the geographic position, the new terminals for e-fuels, bunkering, etc., new ports are very, very, very important in our strategy to develop projects in Morocco. The regulatory framework is very, very clear and very ambitious and transparent. We have laws for PPAs, for self-production, for public-private partnership. Our context regulatory framework is there is a rapprochement with the European regulatory framework, and it's very important for us to export, to have the possibility to export. And in the next weeks or next month, we are going to present the deployment of the Morocco offer, and it's something very very important for the future projects and the investors. The human capital in the last point, it's something who take a lot of attention from our parts, and we try to develop research and development, and also training centers for engineers, for technicians to have the necessary human resource to accompany this dynamic of green hydrogen projects. This diagram summarizes everything I have just said. We see in green colors all the assets of the strengths of Morocco, such renewable energy resources, desalination station, the presence of our giants in the phosphate industry, the presence of very important ports, industry steels, and in purple, which we can see the challenge, like the power grid, the gas grid, the pipeline, etc. All that of a challenge, and we are working on that. So what I can share with you in the 5 minutes so still of my presentation, we carried out an analysis to know the application the best suited to development and the most relevant business case in the Moroccan context. I will be delighted to share the first conclusion with you. First, we can see here that the potential national off-takers are present of all application, iron and steel, chemical and petrochemical OCP, cement and lime. We have many operator in cement, aluminium, agri-food, glass, aviation, shipping. All the application of hydrogen, it's possible to develop it in Morocco. But this study, we focalize or we pushed the analysis of only 3 business cases: ammonia, methanol, and dairy, giving the importance of these products for our industry, for our neighbor and main customer, which is Europe, and for the competitiveness of this product compared to those currently used. For ammonia, what I can say that Morocco controls the world's largest phosphate rock reserves, but it depends on imported ammonia for the production of fertilizer, of course. Now we import about 2 million tons of fossil ammonia per year. And this market of ammonia will be doubled in 2050. It will be about 4 million tons. As you know, fossil ammonia production is highly carbon intensive, and the renewable ammonia can reduce the footprint by more than 95%. That's why a domestic green ammonia production is very important for us, because it will resolve the dependency from natural gas prices. We know what is the issue with the price of natural gas, with the wars, etc. The green ammonia production can strengthen and decarbonize our domestic fertilizer industry. And it's very important for the OCP due to the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. It can stabilize our balance of trade and unlock the vast Moroccan renewable electricity potential. And the study showed that the expected prices of renewable ammonia in Morocco, it will be about $500 to $700 per ton. I can say here in NEOM it's about 350, and in Egypt $600 to $800 per ton. And what's it's very important that the cost can be go down to 40% in 2050. The biggest project now in Morocco for ammonia is an OCP project. It's a project, it's a total investment of $13 billion for the period 2023 and 2032. And this investment will enable OCP to achieve air carbon neutrality in 2040. This project, the objective is the desalination of seawater, more than 500 billion cubic meters, more than 5 gigawatt photovoltaic and wind farms, and the project will produce 200,000 tons of ammonia per year by 2026, and 2 million in 2027 and 3 million in 2032. This OCP project is among the most important projects announced in the world, with a precise deadline and with a precise time to market. You can see here 3,000 kiloton per year in 2032. The player, as I said in the beginning of my presentation, the players are positioned for the ammonia value chain are already operating in Morocco, and there is some potential new entrants in all the value chain in terms of renewable resource, ammonia production, transport, and final usage. As you know, the ports and infrastructure are very important factors. We have in Morocco different ports, some commercial ports, fishing ports, but we are developing now three big ports. One in the east of Morocco is Nador West Med, and it will be an energetic hub. Two others in the south of Morocco, where we have the most important potential of renewable energy and desalination. One in Dakhla and one in Gelmim. All the sports are for hydrogen and derivative. So what can I say about ammonia is that Morocco strengths would allow to target highly competitive markets of ammonia, and export markets as a short-term strategy. It's our first project, so will be operational, as I said. 2026 is a deadline for the first molecule of ammonia in Morocco. For methanol, the situation is different, and the main obstacle is CO2. It was already explained by the previous speakers. The CO2 in Morocco, the CO2 from combustion or biofuels or biomass, the volumes are negligible, and it's not an option. The CO2 from geological sources there is no sources identified. The CO2 from direct air capture, the cost is very high. And CO2 from industrial process, it's possible. We have a lot of cemetery, etc., but it's not viable under post 2041 due to the Union European legislation. The actors are here. We can develop projects, but due to these regulatory drivers, the RED II directive related to industry capture, the CO2 and additionality principles, and due to the markets, Morocco has two options. Focusing exclusively on transportation industry, maritime and perhaps aviation after, and option two, relying on maritime industry until 2035, and then diversify sales to aviation and chemical industry. That's the two options for methanol. The context is different. The Moroccan steel production is depend on scrap imports, mainly from Europe, and now the Europe steel companies are switching their production from blast furnace to electric furnace, and their demand of scrap will increase. That's a problem for us because scrap imports from Europe are going to decrease. And in the same time, it's an opportunity for us to develop DRI in our steel industry. The second observation is that Morocco still has a high share of green steel due to the use of electric arc furnace powered with renewable energy. We have a high potential for renewable energy. The initial situation with all furnace being electrical. So we can develop the entire value chain in Morocco with an increased efficiency due to the renewable energy and reduced investment demand because of all our furnaces are electrical. The third remark is the European Union is turned from a net exporter to a net importer of steel. And the capacity of Morocco to provide sustainable steel is here. There is a short transport distance of with Europe. So Europe steel demand can be filled in parts, of course, by the Moroccan steel industry. The biggest problem of steel is the iron ore because our local industry we have not mines of iron ore, so we import everything, and it's a factor who can oblige Morocco to decide to rely on their imports. So that's the results of our analysis of the markets. I have some more slides for the presentation of the cluster, but I already done it in the beginning of my presentation. That's our main cluster actors. That's the organization. We have a committee research and development, the committee of industry and renewable energy, committee in chemistry, in committee projects, partnership and international partnership committee, transportation, energy. And our strategy is to strengthen the human and technical and technological capacities of national actors, structuring a local industrial value chain around the green hydrogen in territory, in region, develop innovation across the entire green hydrogen value chain, supports the national task force, and here I'm speaking about regulation, about standardization, etc., and contribute to the promotion of green hydrogen on a national and international scales. Thank you very much, and I will be happy to answer some questions from your side.
Thank you so much, Mr. Murad, for your very detailed presentation introducing to us the Morocco's hydrogen roadmap and following timeline. So before we delve into the detailed questions, I think the audience are very interested in the Morocco Offer project that you have just mentioned. Can you further explain what is Morocco Offer and why it is so important for Morocco?
Thank you for the questions. It's actually the most important question that we receive all the time. The Moroccan offer is a description of what Morocco can offer to developers, to investors in terms of aid, in terms of land, and what is the national organization to accept and to go on an hydrogen project. Now there is the Moroccan offer is validated by the government and by the king, and there is a circular who is under preparation by the government to deploy this Moroccan offer and specify what incentive that will be allocated to every project in hydrogen in Morocco.
Yes, and it's not entirely the same as what we saw in Oman. So in terms of foreign investment, any support that will be provided in this Morocco Offer project or by the Morocco government?
Actually, there is a difference with Oman because until now we doesn't communicate what are the projects who will be developed in Morocco. We have actually more than 100 projects demand, but everyone waits for the deploying of this Moroccan offer to go ahead. What I can say about foreign investments, that Morocco now is one of the best investments destination in terms of competitiveness, given the young, well-trained and competitive human capital, due to and specifically in green energy. Green energy now attracts a lot of investors in Morocco because in this carbon-free world, Moroccan production will benefit for these investors. A second point is that the Moroccan market is much larger that we think, because it's about 2.5 billion consumers, and this thanks to the free trade agreements that Morocco signed with the USA, with the European Union, etc. Now, in December 2022, Morocco has just adopted a new investment charter. This investment charter is structured around 3 pillars. The first one is 4 support chains for private foreign investments, with the bonuses which will encourage investments, which the most important investment for us is that who will create jobs, create local value, and tackle sustainable development. That's the first pillar. The second pillar is to reform and improve the business climate in the country. And the third pillar is to unify and decentralize the governance of the project in Morocco. This charter is available for all kind of projects, but the hydrogen projects, there is a special measure in terms of lands who will be communicated in the next weeks.
And in different MENA countries, will most likely have different business strategies. What business models do you think fit best within the Morocco context? Which sector to target, how we run business?
Yes, I think I said in my presentation that the 3 business case, the most important for us and the potential who can have a potential important development is ammonia, due to the cost and due to the existence, the presence of a very important off-takers, is a national industry of fertilizer. The second one is methanol, because of our ports and the maritime trajectory of it's for us, we can capture some companies for bunkering, etc. And the third one is the DRI, donc steel, the green steel, who can be developed because of the demand of Europe, who is very next to Morocco, and the presence of potential off-takers in Morocco. So the methanol, ammonia, and the DRI.
Yes, and the last question, how fast do you foresee the upcoming green hydrogen or clean hydrogen projects in Morocco?
Yes, that's a very good question. I think I presented the OCP projects. The OCP projects have a very precise timetable. as I presented it. It's for the first molecule will be in 2026, and I think this project will have a knock-on effect for the other projects. We have some signs that it will be happen because we have a the very important John Cockerill for electrolyzer who is installed now in Morocco. We have Siemens who is under development of his business strategy for electrolyzer and all other equipment. So we have the 2026 for the first molecule from green hydrogen will be used and in our country.
Thank you so much, Mr. Murad Hajaji, for your very kind presentation and for staying us. And now, as we draw the curtains on this insightful webinar, I want to extend our heartfelt gratitude again to all of our distinguished speakers, Doblas, Dr. Nikunj, Mr. Rumasa, Mr. Dinesh, Mr. Murad, and also Mr. Khalid for sharing your expertise. And also, I want to appreciate each and every one of our audience for being active in this engaging discussion.